3:30 is our starting time, and I believe it's just about that time. And this session is titled Retention/Dropouts. I'm Bob Van Antwerp, moderator for this period of time, with the capable assistance of two panelists, Martin Mallard on my right, your left, from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. That's a handle, isn't it? And on my left, your right, is Bob Poyner from Plainsville, Illinois. In this panel session, we'll be discussing the various methods of dancer retention in both class and club, the reason for dropouts in both class and club, and the reason for staying, the importance of follow-up from missed class or club sessions, and do we have bored dancers or boring callers, plus the sociability and caller attitudes. It does look like we have our work cut out for us in this particular section, plus the fact I think we're noticing more than the average of dancer dropouts in both class and club than we've experienced in quite some time. I personally believe this session is one of the most important ones that we will be offering here at the convention due to the problems we are now facing. Following the presentation by our panelists, I will then open the discussion for questions and answers from you, the attendees, in an effort to obtain some of the solutions to our problems. At this point of time, we will ask you to come to the microphone and once again state your name, your city, and then proceed with your question or statement. It will be my prerogative as a moderator to keep your remarks within the framework of our discussion and also allow you a certain time limit and not permit you to be exposed to the mic too long a time, which would not allow others to participate. I request that we not get into the "we do it this way in my hometown" syndrome, which we have a tendency to do, but to consider where our problems lie, and that is nationally and internationally in the retention and dropout area. Now, before I bring on our panelist, our first panelist, I'd like to open our discussion and provoke some thinking with some quick statistics that have been compiled by Legacy. Knowing some of you have maybe already read them, but others may be not aware of this report, and I do not want to bore you with statistics. I hate to have somebody give you a bunch of figures and it doesn't mean anything to you. But I do feel these are important to us in this particular session. As most of you know, Legacy has been doing a dancer survey for quite some time, and it's been my contention for quite some time that we have not been listening to our dancers. We need to listen to our dancers more. They have completed close to 20,000 completed forms in the last few years. The average respondent has been dancing 6 years, and they dance an average of 6 times monthly. Also, class sizes and dance attendance were lower in metropolitan and suburban areas. Strong correlation was noticed between the average number of lessons and dancer retention. What do dancers enjoy the most? From their survey, they report the following: open club dances, 49%. Vacation and weekend programs, 13%. Rounds, workshops, festivals, and conventions, 10% for each one of those. Lessons were more popular in rural areas, and open club dances appealed more to dancers in small towns. Rounds, vacation institutes appealed to city dancers, and workshops were more popular in the suburban areas. One question of what would help square dancing the most was asked, and the response was more workshop tips, 37%. Stabilize all list of programs, 26%. More mainstream clubs, 23%, and more lessons, 21%. The dancers collectively lacked confidence in their ability to dance what is being called from their responses. It was interesting to me also that they also state that club leadership, pleasure of square and round dancing, have not conformed to the overall trend and should be considered a problem area. Pleasure of dancing was the highest downtrend. Now, from the other responses, I'm going to skip into the portion here where the responses and demographics in far as class sizes, beginners class sizes. Rural areas increased by 21, that's on an average basis, but they decreased by 34. Small towns increased by 19, but decreased by 33. Cities increased by 20, decreased by 34. Suburban increased by 17, decreased by 30. In the metropolitan areas, they increased by 18, decreased by 34. So you can see, as you look at the sliding scale, you can see that the classes were down every place. Now, the survey forms processed were as follows. Starting in 1980, they had 2,077 processed. In 82, 4,280. 1983, 5,481. 1985, 7,584, for a total of approximately 19,422 forms from actual dancers. Finally, in the 1985 survey, and I'll close off here, the survey, the following was requested: the location, the opinions, club dance size, class size, number of lessons, percentage dancing after 2 years, were they a caller, a cure, a club association officer, a dancer, and what are the most needed changes and what was enjoyed the most, and 14 other aspects. So they had a pretty thorough report put out by Legacy. So I think I use this just as a stimulant to give you a little idea of what Legacy has been doing and where we happen to be standing at the present time. Now, with this completed, I would like to introduce our first panelist from Saskatchewan, Martin Mallard. Martin Mallard is a board member of the executive committee, and who will be discussing various methods of dancer retention in both class and club and the reason for dropouts. Now, I'd have to say, having called, not in his specific area, but in different parts of Canada, that the dropout rate to me is by far less and minimal with compared to what we have in the States here. So without further ado, let's give a nice welcome to Martin Mallard. Martin?
Thank you, Bob. One of the reasons I think that we have less dropout, we have a marvelous filter called the 49th parallel. We get a chance to see what you people try, and if it didn't work, we don't use it. There are several things when we talk about the dropouts and retention. They're both very, very closely related. Because if you retain them, of course, they don't drop out. I think that's a foregone conclusion. But what causes your dancers to drift away and to maybe quit dancing or go to another caller? Let's look at some of them. Perhaps the caller and his partner's attitude, not just towards the square dance, but towards people. Does he listen to the little dancer in his club? Maybe the one that only dances in his club, doesn't go to any festivals, seldom guests, but he's always there. He sweeps the floor, he makes the coffee, he greets the people at the door. He does all these little things that make a club a social function. Instead, perhaps he listens to the ardent dancer who does not want to be on the executive, does not want to make the coffee, does not do any of the greeting, but goes to all the festivals, goes to all the guest callers, and comes back and says, "Hey, Mac, don't you think you better teach such and such?" And perhaps that attitude is causing him trouble within his club, and he listens to him. And that little guy no longer greets the people at the door. He goes somewhere else. Maybe he goes home and watches TV. Also, does he enjoy calling? Or is it a necessary adjunct for him to make a living? They can both work together, because if he enjoys calling, it obviously will show. Does his partner mix with the people, or does she sit in a corner and growl? We've seen them. We've seen callers' wives that come in and they sit and read a book in the corner. They don't talk to the people that are in the club. It's a social function. It's a social recreation. And sometimes we lose track of that as callers. We're so involved in the music and so involved in the choreography, we never treat it as a social function. And that's very important, because you have a family out there and they are visiting you in your living room. And if you treat it in that fashion, you have a much better chance of success. Also, your selection of material. As I said earlier, the high-frequency dancer, of course, is going to pressure the caller to call what he wants. The dancer who is not a high-frequency dancer really never bothers you, unless he gets clobbered too often, and then really you don't get bothered by him, he leaves. So your selection of material is important to how long your club survives, and that's called judgment. If you as a caller don't have judgment, you're in trouble. And really, your wife is part of that judgment too. When she comes out on the floor and dances with your people, listen to her when she comes up and says, hey, Joe didn't succeed. Neither did Mary. And maybe you were watching your pet square down on the left so you could resolve that cute little figure you had out there, but you forgot that other cute little figure in the gingham that didn't make it. So again, your choice of material is very important. And all that comes under attitude towards your club, towards your dancers, towards your material. So be very, very conscious of that function, because it can cause people to drift to another club, cause them to take up bowling, or any other function that they find social attributes in, which will fulfill their desire to be a sociable creature. Another thing that will make a club, and we found this, I'm speaking from personal experience, although Van said don't bring in personal feelings and personal things. The club that has had the slow growth usually is the one that succeeds the longest. Not always, but usually. If you look back in your own area, wherever you come from, and you look at the clubs that are there, you will find that some of them somewhere started when we only had maybe 40 basics, and they grew slowly. And those clubs are still functioning. And when you take a dancer and you push him in, and you say, hey, fella, you got to learn what it took us 30 years to learn, and you're going to learn it in 30 weeks. He's got to be some smart character to get through it all. So again, slow growth in both teaching and in the growth of a club can, I won't say always, but can be a very, very successful thing. In Canada, I think it's more common than not that the clubs have had slow growth. In our own area, we really don't have any A1, A2 clubs, believe it or not. And we've been dancing in our area for something like 35 years. We have 2 clubs who use A1 once in a while for workshop. They claim to be plus clubs. They're not fully plus clubs. The rest of our clubs are mainstream, and they draw their workshop from plus. We average 8 to 10 squares in every club, with no problems at all. Another thing that comes up, there's a lot of controversy over whether a club should be caller run or dancer run, and I really can't take either side because I run my classes my own way. I do not get involved with my clubs to run classes because I feel I can teach them better than they can tell me to, and they don't argue with me, thank heavens. But all our clubs are run by dancers, and I don't find it wrong, because I am a member of their executive. And I can stand up and say, hey, fellas, you're not doing the way it should be done. And thank heavens they once in a while listen. And I don't think as leaders we should be ashamed or afraid or concerned when we state our ethical considerations of what the dancers are doing. And you notice I said ethical considerations, not necessarily personal considerations, but the ethical considerations of what they are doing as to what it might do to harm their club or harm their dancing recreation in the area. So if you can have that type of communication with your dancers and with your area callers, again, your survival of your dancers and of your clubs will be greatly enhanced. I spoke about the classes and who runs them. One of the things that happens with a class, if your club sponsors a class and hires a caller other than you to call for that class, you stand a very good chance of having another club form in your area. I don't know how many of you have had that happen, but it has quite frequently happened in our area where we have hired a caller to teach a class and we get a new club. And this is not entirely wrong because it gives us another dancing base, another place to expand to. But as a caller, you should try, if you want those dancers to succeed and go to your clubs, you should try to teach your own classes for your own clubs. And again, your influence on those dancers and how you treat them is very, very important. As they grow to know you as a person, and I say know you as a person, not as a caller, they will learn to appreciate all your faults and all your good points, just as they do their friends. And if you can become a friend of theirs, not in the truest sense that you go out for supper and you court them around and this type of thing, but where they can talk to you about the problems that they are having learning, you will have them as dancers for a long time. And if you encourage them to go out and dance to other callers in your area and tell them at what point they can go to various clubs in your areas, maybe take them yourself if you possibly have the nights to do it, and work with the caller that is calling for that club and say, hey, I'm bringing over my class tonight. Does your club welcome them? Or will they welcome them? And will you structure your program around what they are doing to make them welcome? I tell the dancers that I train, and I feel every caller should do this, when you train a dancer, he should feel free to dance in any club he sees fit to dance in. He is not your dancer or my dancer. He belongs to square dancing. And if you can stomach that clause and be a bigger person because of it, the dancers in your area will appreciate it. Another thing we have within the square dance field is the level or stigma, whichever you want to call it, of programs. CALLERLAB created these programs, but unfortunately they have sort of been misused in many ways. The dancers took them and said, hey, I'm a plus dancer, or I'm an A1 dancer. And the poor little guy that's learning, he looks up there and says, man, aren't they terrific? He doesn't know what he's talking about. But he's been told by those dancers that they're terrific. So you have to be careful to impart to these people that the lists are part of a training manual. And gradually the area will break away from it. We don't have the problems with the lists and so forth so far in our area. And I do feel it's because of the way our newcomers are taught. They come out and they dance. That's the first thing we say is learn to dance. Don't worry about what you know. We hold dances for all the various levels and the people are very happy with it. Our so-called plus dancers, we had Herb Egender here just 2 weeks ago. Herb called us a basic dance. Every plus dancer we had was there. And so were all our new class members. And we had a ball. So if you can get around that by your attitude, it will help. And you notice I'm stressing the attitude of the caller and his partner to the dance. One of the problems that we all have as callers is that time demand, both on us and on the dancers. But sometimes the time demand that we make of the dancers is the thing that drives them out of the square dance field too. You feel real great, hey, that radio station phoned up, we got a TV program on tonight, we need dancers, you, and you, pack up whatever you're doing, put on your square dance duds, you're coming down to the TV station, we're putting on a program. They'll come down the first time. They might even come down the second time. But about the third or fourth time you draw them away from something they want to do, they're going to tell you to go fly a kite. So be judicious when you select or ask people to be part of something extra special over and above what they are doing in their clubs. We find it is best to encourage people to be part of society as well as being part of square dancing. Because if they dance enough that they are no longer part of society, they do not have the contacts to bring in the new dancers. If you say, well, let's have you dance Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we'll give you Saturday off, but Sunday's the workshop. So Sunday morning they go to church, they come to the workshop. Saturday they go shopping. They don't do anything else. But if they do bowling on Wednesday night, maybe they go swimming on Sunday, maybe they do something else 2 or 3 nights a week, but they maybe dance twice a week. They've got contacts where they can find you new dancers, and that's important too. Encourage them to be something as well as good dancers. One of the things that we have heard many years coming to CALLERLAB is callers complaining about other callers stealing their dancers. I don't believe that this is possible. I don't think that a caller can steal a dancer. But I do believe that we as callers give them away unknowingly because we don't give them what the guy that, quote, stole them gave them. They go out guesting somewhere, and maybe they find a club that is a very happy, sociable, nice, smooth dancing club and a happy, friendly caller. And they look at you as a grump up on the stage and say, boy, I don't have to put up with that. I'm going over to dance to Joe. And again, it gets down to our attitude as callers. And I can't stress strong enough that we have to be leaders. We have to be friends of the dancers. And above all, we have to keep that social attitude in our club. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. One of the most difficult times in holding a panel discussion or having people listen to panelists is in the afternoon after you've had a lunch. And so I'm going to count 3, and I'd like to have you all clap your hands on 3 so we can wake up the guy next to you, will you? 1, 2, 3. Some are off beat. Thank you. All right, our next panelist, and I'll have to admit I do not know Bob personally. The first time I've really had an opportunity to be around Bob, is from Plainfield, Illinois. He started calling in 1963. Married, has 2 children, a boy and a girl. He has 7 clubs, of which he's the club caller for. He's recorded on Square Tune, C-Bar C, Sunray, and presently recording on Chicago Country. I didn't tell that much about you, did I, Martin? No? I didn't know that you wouldn't give me anything, all right? He has taught new dancer classes every year since 1963. From 1 to 4 classes a year. He's a part-time traveling caller, works full-time, 40 hours a week for Caterpillar Tractor Company. Been a member of CALLERLAB since 1975. Please welcome Bob Poyner.
Thank you, Bob. I think I got the toughest part of this thing. You said everything I was going to say. Almost. First of all, one of my topics was reasons for staying, as well as the importance of follow-up of missed sessions. I think we lose a lot of dancers because during the first few weeks of your class, they have not been made real welcome. Maybe you have given them too much, overloaded their brain, so to speak, and scared them half to death. I try to take each class, especially the very first few nights of lessons, to get acquainted with my dancers. The best way to succeed in it is to win their friendship from day one. And you must be able to talk to each one of those individuals. You got to remember, you're pulling them away from something that they were doing before. Everybody has their nights tied up. And Mama has pulled Dad away for an evening of what we call fun, friendship, and fellowship. Now you have taken him away from some activity. Monday nights are tough on classes. Good old Monday night football. I have a class on Monday nights. This is the first year that we have not had a class on Monday nights. Because last year, we started out with over 4 squares of new dancers. By the end of about the 10th week, we had lost 1/3 of those. By the end of the midway session, we had lost over 50%. I became very concerned. That's why I was glad to be part of this panel. I asked my vice president of the club that was in charge of this class if he could find out, by contacting each one of those individuals, find out why those people dropped out from square dance activity. The news was very shocking. I thought, well, if it's something I'm doing, I want to know so I can correct that. Well, I found out that it wasn't anything that we had done. It wasn't anything that anybody in the club had done. A lot of the dropouts was because they had transferred to different areas of the country, different state. Some, their job had changed, or they did not have the evening available. What we suggested was that they try a Sunday night class. And the one couple did, and they went back into class. Had we not contacted those people, we would have lost them forever. One was quite humorous. The lady of the house had twisted the guy's arm to get him to come the first night, as most women do. Have a hard time getting Dad out the first night. My mother did. Okay, well, they got Dad out that first night, and lo and behold, he loved it. She didn't. She didn't like him dancing with the other women. So as a result, he couldn't get her to come back. Now, he wanted to come back. But if he had to come back, he told the vice president, he says, there would have been a divorce in the family. And they had been married for over 25 years. He didn't want that. So he said, I just started watching my Monday night football again. And that one was just a little different. It was a little bit out of the ordinary, something that you don't normally hear. Then one thing that I find good reason for staying is if you keep your dancers interested in it, you must make your class interesting for these people. But don't overload them. The first night is so important. That first night you're going to either win them or you're going to lose them. I've had a very, very successful 23 years with classes in the retention of the people in the first few weeks. Various reasons that you'll always lose a certain percentage of your class. I've had probably a 10% dropout rate since day one for various different reasons. And one of the main reasons is they don't like it. Well, everybody is not cut out to be a square dancer. Let's face it. Some can, some can't. The biggest percentage of the people out there can. Now, if you do not overload them with too much to remember that first night, those people will come back. You can take the first 4 or 5 basics and teach that in one night with enough interest to keep those people coming back. Give them some fun. Another thing is the teaching order. So important. You don't start building a house by putting the roof up first. We have callers in our area who take things, they look at a singing call they're going to use for the night. Oh, that's got a relay the Ducey in it. I better teach that. People have had 4 nights of class, and he teaches relay the Ducey. Those people came to a workshop of mine. This workshop was for people who had been dancing for better than 2 to 3 years. They could not dance the basics because they had not been taught the basics. We have to give them the foundation. If you give them the right foundation and build it solid enough, you'll retain 90% of every class that you teach. And the caller's attitude has a whole lot to do with it. You as the leader, you have to lead these people. You cannot kill them. Okay, so what do we mean by the attitude of the caller? Are you the type caller who will be very sociable to your dancers, whether it's being at your class or your club? I, for one, I feel that greeting those people as they come in that door the first night is one of the most important roles that you can do as their teacher and their leader. You cannot go up on your stage and stand there and wait for the club to get all the people signed in, collect their money, and tell you, okay, we're ready for you to start now. You can't do that, gentlemen and ladies. We have to be the leader. We have to make those people welcome from day one. The minute they walk in that door, show them you care. And carry that on throughout your club. I've had a lot of my dancers come to me and say, Bob, do you know so-and-so caller? Yes, I do. We don't like him. He doesn't do the things you do. We went to his club and he didn't make us welcome. He wasn't at the front door to greet us as we walked in. He didn't get down off the stage all night. He left a very bad impression as a leader to those dancers, and as a result, he'll never get them back again. I don't know how you feel, but I want dancers to come and enjoy me and dance to me. So you let them dance when they do come to you. Give them an interesting program. You don't have to kill them with your knowledge of calls. The new dancers, when they first graduate and come out, the first dance that they go to other than their club caller or their teacher, you can either kill them or you'll keep them. I've had a lot of my dancers come back to me and tell me that they would never go back to such and such a club because of their caller. Because he just murdered them the first night. He was too fast. They said he must have had the thing up on 50, and he just run them to death. I call it clipping time myself. You don't have to kick the speed up to cut your dancers short. Every call takes so many beats of music. Let the people have time to dance. If you let them dance, they'll enjoy you, they'll enjoy the evening, they'll enjoy the club, and they'll come back. You'll have them forever. I hope I haven't missed anything here. One thing on new dancers when they come in the first night, I've had some that were so nervous that they practically would break the fingers of the lady's hand that they were holding. Just you could tell that they were tense and uptight. Okay? Now, I don't have a problem with people understanding me once they get accustomed to the accent. So I make a little joke about my accent when I first start. I tell them, say, once you get accustomed to my French accent, you won't have any problem. And it's a French accent, Southern French. And this breaks the ice with the people. You have to keep those people laughing so that you know they're enjoying themselves and you've got their attention. I start my evenings out by having everybody in a big circle just to break the tension and to let them get acquainted. Then I have everybody change partners. I do not let husband and wife dance together the first part of the class. You know why? How many here do that? How many do not let them dance husband and wife? That's good. I'm glad I'm not the only one. I learned the hard way. I lost some dancers in a class because they were dancing together all the time, and they got into arguments on the way home over which one made the mistake. Okay? So then, once you get them mixed up, they all get acquainted with one another, and they have started a lasting friendship. And they will always be together. Every class I see that I teach, I can see the closeness of people who had never known one another before they walked in that door the first night. And those people have stayed friends all the way through their class, and it carries right on when they go into the club. So when the club says, hey, we're going banner stealing tonight, we need 2 more couples. Well, when you get one of them, you've got the other one, because they always go together. And it helps. It helps retain these dancers, and we'll keep them forever if we can keep the friendship there and keep them dancing. I took a poll just over the weekend, and I had some dancers give me some of their viewpoints on dropouts and retention. One of the most interesting ones was the high initial cost of lessons. In this particular area where I was, the Park District charges $50 per couple the first night. Up front, $50. The first night, the Park District wants the money up front. Okay, now that's just for the first night. That's the registration fee. Now, I think that's a little ridiculous. The total cost of their lessons, once they start paying, because after that they have to pay so much per couple each night. It's $5 per couple each night. Okay? So you're up to $200 for your 30-week class. Now, I know we have some callers in our area who told me that our lessons are too inexpensive. And those particular clubs are charging in the area of $100 to $125 per couple. Now, I remember when I first started in this activity, gentlemen, I taught a teenage class for the very first class I ever taught. I'll never forget those children because they were some of the finest teenagers that I ever knew. They took my wife and I as as their adopted parents, so to speak. They taught me a lot. Sad to say that none of those are dancing anymore because I moved out of the area, and the adults that took over afterwards run them off. Ran them off because they wouldn't let them be a part of their groups. And there wasn't anybody else to take over the teenage activity after I left. I was a 27-year-old teenager at the time. And we loved those kids. And they worked hard for us. You know what they charged, what I got from them for lessons? 50 cents a piece each night. They gave me their allowance, 50 cents a week. And I taught a lot of young people to dance. 3 of the young fellows in there were super fine young callers. I had them for 2 years. And after I left, the adults wouldn't let them call at a festival because they didn't have a club. And so they quit. We don't need that. We need to keep our young people because they are the leaders of tomorrow. Every class you teach, I'm sure that you always have at least one guy or one gal come up to you and say, how do you become a caller? How do you approach them? Do you welcome them? I do. I pick out a couple of singing calls and let them take them home. Let them work on them. And I say, when you have those singing calls where you feel comfortable with them, I'd love to hear it. And I take it from there. You have to do that to keep the activity going. We're not going to be around forever. I don't like to think of the day when I'm not going to be here. I'm proud to be part of CALLERLAB. I've learned a lot. I've met a lot of guys that I never would have before, and it's all through the square dance activity. Gentlemen, our classes is where that all starts. Let's keep our dancers dancing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. In reference to Martin, I wanted to give you a little more background on Martin over here. He has 5 clubs which are 30 years of age or older. He's taught a class each year of those 30 years. He calls 5 to 6 nights a week. You must be wealthy. He works 37 and a half. Why 37 and a half hours? Why not a 40-hour week?
Well, our federal government's a little weird.
Oh, for National Research Council, and his wife, who's a lovely lady, accompanies him every night. Listen to Bob reminds me of some statistics that are kind of interesting to me. How many here have been calling at least 20 years? How many have been calling at least 30 years? Anybody over 35? Well, those who have been over 35 years in the teaching and the calling field will remember at the time when we used to teach classes, which would be a 6-week class, and we could teach everything in the world in 6 weeks. And at that time, we were a little bit less than you. We were getting 25 cents a person. Which reminds me also of in 1960, in the 60s, I can't tell you exactly when, it kind of reminds me of a little story of, I've used this for many years, but it's a true fact. I was calling a festival dance in Fort Collins, Colorado, for the Aggies there. We had about 40 to 50 squares on the floor, and the podium or the stage wasn't over about 18 inches high. As I stood on the stage there, I tried to get a couple to fill one of the squares. It was very difficult. I had everybody ready to go except one square. So finally I coaxed a little couple off the sidelines, and I could tell that they were brand new in the square dance scheme. It looked like they hadn't been dancing. You could almost see the perspiration in their hands, and their knees were shaking as they came up. As they approached the square, the number 1 man in the number 1 position, and we were filling the number 4 position, says, I don't know whether you can dance with us or not. We're quite experienced dancers. We've been dancing for quite some time. And this is a true story because I could hear it. But I was so proud because the young man who posted this said, well, that's all right. We're the type of people that make you look good. In March 29th, a survey came out, 1985, which was once again, from Legacy. From 948 survey comments, report to Legacy, the following was reported. One of the highest things reported as reason for dropouts: callers are the cause of the problems. The 2 reasons cited most were greed of callers and saying they had to teach a certain way because CALLERLAB said so. Next one was too many calls. Then the graduates are not ready for clubs. Should dance for fun. Dancers are unfriendly. Better teaching is needed. I think we all agree with this. Problem with levels, better promotion needed, so on and so on, right on down the line. You've heard these time and time again. But I started accumulating in a file at home of different things that I would read articles on in regards to dancer retention and dropouts, which I have quite a file after so many years. And these are, I can't tell you exactly where all these came from, but as I'd pick out excerpts from these, I would put them in my file. Some of the comments I have personally received from even letters. Being on the board here since the start of CALLERLAB, I've received a lot of letters, and I'm sure you can imagine being chairman for 2 years, you do receive a lot of letters. But some of the things that I received was the attitude of callers has to be changed. Callers expect too much from the dancers. There is no way to prepare a dancer for some gun-toting callers who like to blow the dancers off the floor. Callers have to develop a protective feeling for all dancers and not just the ones he has taught. Any change from familiar to unfamiliar is bound to create problems. And I'm sure all of you in teaching classes know that you have people come in off the street that have never been to a square dance, and you start using some foreign language like Alaman left to them and certain things. They have to be gradually brought into this concept. Callers must judge each dance situation and create a program that will both entertain and educate the dancers. Only the strongest dancers will survive, and I say this, we have to change. It can be done without having to sacrifice schoolwork, bowling, job, or other recreational outlets. Put the family, dancing, and fun back in the activity, which you've heard so many times, and take out the pressure and inflated egos of our callers and dancers. A survey in New Zealand, we have some here visiting us from New Zealand. Glad you're here. This came from a survey in New Zealand. I'm sorry I can't tell you where it's from. But anyway, it was from your country. And I might say I enjoyed calling in Christchurch 2 different times and enjoyed your group very much. They asked, why did you stop dancing? 5% said they just did not like it. Can you imagine that? All of us here as callers think, well, how can people not like square dancing? But there's a certain percentage of people who do not like the square dance. 20% said they could not keep up with the fast pace. 75% said unavoidable absences, which we have in our classes. We have to realize this. Illnesses, holidays, busy work period. Another thing was past timetables have been given little thought to the separate needs of fast and slow learners, the bored and the frustrated. Recent programs are timed in theory to the medium, but in practice to the fastest, progressing speedily without integration or fun dancing to reach the mainstream and plus as soon as possible. Now, we ask quite a few things of many people in CALLERLAB, but I'm going to give you something also. When Gene Trimmer's group, which was a subcommittee of the ad hoc committee, which I appointed last year in Phoenix, but before I get into that, some of the other things that I had in my little file said this. Lessening attendance at beginner level leads to insufficient numbers for the next advanced class, if you want to call it, and ever more frantic efforts to push the beginners through, permanently rejecting the slow learners. Concentration upon generating instant club dancers would be better rewarded if it were directed at increasing and especially at retaining the new entrants. It needs a new approach that avoids the obstacles of over-speedy learning, entry only once a year, lack of advertising, and the attempt to keep everyone in step. Present enrollments, and I think you will agree with this, come mainly from friends of friends, with 99% of the outside public completely unaware of square dancing beyond the assumption that it is a specialist interest of perhaps 30 to 40 people. Some new dancers, and I agree that many new dancers in today's episode of Hustle Bustle, may enjoy a shortened basic course of, say, 20 weeks and would like to remain there. I had a banker in one of my classes one night. He's still dancing with me, but he said, I make decisions 5 days a week. And when I come to the class and the club that you have, I hope to be able to not have to make a decision every time I get up on the floor. Well, he is still with me. He went through 3 beginners classes, but he had a point which I had never forgotten. Callers have little incentive to offer exciting routines since at the lower levels, and slower learners are pushed upwards without attaining the fully automatic dancing that originally were seeking. Ed Gilmore told me, I was with Ed Gilmore just before he passed away. We were rooming together at a Cedar Mart one night, and I believe what Ed said. Ed told me that it took approximately 75 times of hearing a particular move for it to be automatic. Now, that's not including circle left, circle right, etc. But after hearing a right and left through 75 times, or a lady's chain 75 times, or a do paso, or whatever it is, it takes about 75 times before you can do this automatically. Some people whose vocations provide full or even excessive mental stimulation and who, when at leisure, seek the physical enjoyment of automatic dancing unburdened by mental challenge. Average learners who have stumbled through the basics with hiccups and uncertainties are sometimes happy to settle into confident non-teaching evenings before perhaps choosing to proceed further. I personally hate to see a teach the entire evening. You have to give them an opportunity to relax, let their hair down, enjoy a little bit what they have learned. In other words, a lot of people say use a drift and cram method, or cram and drift. I go on with this to a certain extent, but there has to be a certain time when you have to let them really relax and enjoy it. Now, basic dancing generates few problems. It tends to be overlooked and unprovided for. Yet, it is a program that has its own separate appeal to many people who are now lost to square dancing and ensures the soundest possible foundation for successful and enthusiastic mainstream dancers. Now, we asked Gene Trimmer in the subcommittee of the ad hoc committee to obtain some things in his committee. I'm going to report those, and this came from Gene Trimmer's report. This was some additional things for dropouts with no particular pattern emerges as being the root cause of dancer loss. Too hot in the summer, we'll dance next fall. We just don't dance well enough to dance with the club. We want to take the class again. We want to start clogging. I go tired of being in the same square with children. I get tired, I'm sorry. Club members are not friendly. I couldn't keep up with the rest of the class. The caller was too impatient and embarrassed me. And I've heard quite a few of these. The caller was not prepared. That's our fault. If we're not prepared, that's our fault. Don't blame it on the dancers. The club is run by a click and we stand while the caller calls to them. Of course, you've never heard that. I couldn't dance what the caller was calling. I was put in as a club officer too quickly and was not prepared for it. Caller always called the same thing, so I became bored. I don't need the hassle of bickering dancers and club officers. I don't like mixing or dancing with someone else's partner. I moved away from the area and no clubs close to the new home. Don't like the high level of dancing. One guy said don't like the low level of dancing. Who are you going to satisfy? I left to join another club with a higher or lower programs. I followed the caller to another club. Temporarily left and found upon return that the dancing was too hard. Tired of dancing with beginners, danced too much and got burned out. Class progressed too fast. Personality conflict with a caller or particular dancers. Health problems caused dropout. That's normal. Caller was a poor teacher and class was therefore too confusing. I think there's a message in here someplace. I'm going to come to it. Square dancing demands too much of a commitment from the dancers. Just got too old and not able to keep up. Well, some of us are getting that way right now, I can tell you that. Need time devoted to children and their activities. Then the caller got us into plus before we really learned to dance. Well, we've heard many times this. The club was not willing to back up the new graduates' capability and they pushed us out. One successful thing that you might consider in bringing a class into a club atmosphere, which has proved successful in many areas, and that is to actually obtain a mother and father or an overseer couple of a couple that you have who are graduating. For example, assign a couple who may be a member of a club to the couple coming in and let them oversee them. Maybe pick them up before the dance, maybe go with refreshments after the dance or something, and let them be the ones to get them into squares. This has been very successful in many clubs, and you might want to consider this. In other words, kind of a big brother, big sister act. The caller could only use calls one way, and we did not learn well enough to dance with other clubs. It was too easy to move into plus as it is used, and I found later that I did not really know how to dance the basics. You've never heard that before, I'm sure. Square dancing was really not fun. We really had to work at it. Now, the summary that Gene so states in his committee report, the summary from which he said he received seems to fall in the following categories. Number one, caller's expertise and teaching abilities is less than it should be. Let me repeat that. Caller's expertise and teaching abilities is less than it should be. Number two, some club dancers seem to be clannish and unfriendly. Number three, it becomes too easy to go into plus dancing without first establishing a firm basic and mainstream foundation. 4, dancers move on to upper programs and lose interest in recruiting new ones. 5, class graduates are pushed too rapidly into club operation. We're hearing this time and time and time again. 6, too many calls are being offered in the mainstream program. 7, we have lost the fun of dancing due to the continual learning process. And last but not least, we as callers have to remember who we are serving, the dancer or our own selfish interests. Now with this, we're going to open up our microphone to you and have any of you who would like to make a comment, ask a question of our panelists, and we hope to learn from you as well as ourselves. We'd like to have you come to the microphone, state your name, the city you're from, and your question or your comment. We are now open for comments, and we have approximately 30 minutes for this, so please feel free to use the microphone. Don't overpower me with all of you at one time.
I'm Bill Bailey from Richmond, Virginia. I just want to say, I think we are fighting an uphill battle here. For one thing, most of you remember that in the 60s we went through a tremendous epoch in changing. And a whole generation came up in the 60s there, the me generation. And we are inheriting a whole lot of those now. And you're just uphill. You got a lot of people that come into your clubs, come into your classes with that funny attitude that they have. And I don't know what you can do about it. Another thing, they come in, and I've noticed this the past several years, and I don't know what to do about it either. People come in, lovely people, learn to dance, finish the class, excellent dancer, excellent students, and walk out. And say, no, we wanted to learn to dance. We don't want to keep dancing. We wanted to take square dancing. Beats me. I can't understand that. But I've had that happen several times. They just come in. They are perpetual students. They leave me. They go off and take up bird watching. They learn to do a little bird watching and jump over and take up some other power boating. One confounded thing after the other. And square dancing is just on their agenda. Somewhere down the line they're going to learn square dancing. They finish up the class, walk out.
In other words, it's not a priority with them.
No.
I think Martin Mallard might add something to this, Gene. Just a minute.
Our city is a university city, and that's our prime industry, really. And we work on the university campus. And this is not uncommon. I was going to ask, are you perhaps in a university city? Yeah, and I think I think the term that some people use is yuppie generation. We have had, not a great number, but we have had several that have come in and done exactly the same thing. As a matter of fact, we have one we know is coming back next fall. They were ardent square dancers, attended the classes, attended all the sessions that was available to them, and we said, well, fine, are you going to square dance next year? She said, no, I'm going to learn to fly. They've been out of it now for 3 years. They happened to see some square dancers, found out that they didn't really know what was going on. Now things have changed a little bit. They're going to come back for another session of lessons, but they're not going to stay. They've already told us that. It's part of their style of living. And we have to learn to live with this too, unfortunately. There are perpetual students, and it's something we as callers I don't think understand, but they pays their dollars, they comes through the gate and they fills the square, while the ones that are really ardent are going to stay, and I guess we have to put up with them. Because the one thing you can say for them, the type that are perpetual learners, are learners, and they don't hurt your class any.
Next gentleman.
Mike Turner from Ottawa, Ontario. Like Martin, Canadian. And your comments about retention, Bob, we still have them in Canada, of course. I just attended a session of the ad hoc committee today, and I'm sure Martin, as mainstream committee chairman, should know that as the mainstream and the plus people are talking about changing all these lists. Now, what I have done in my area is to teach a class to the mainstream level and then bring those dancers into my mainstream group. Plus dancers are in a completely different group. And I was quite disturbed at the number of different American callers who were stating the view that to bring them into their club, these people from class had to learn a whole bunch of plus basics. And I think possibly that is a big problem.
Thank you. Let me ask a general consensus, just for the benefit of all of us here. And I have not had a chance to make any other meetings yet because I've been busy with others. How many are interested in seeing changes in what we already have in the mainstream program as far as a list? How many are opposed to any changes? Martin, this gives you a little bit of a sampling, which for the benefit of the tape, that I'd say 90% do not want to see changes. You'll make a comment?
We've already had one mainstream meeting, and there will be another one at 1:30 tomorrow in room 305. And there may be, I say may be, some restructuring of the teaching order and emphasis order in the mainstream list. But the mainstream people have said an absolute loud and very serious no to any changes or deletions from the mainstream list.
I'd just like to add a little bit to the part where talking about the club pushing the new dancers into, quote, their club level. In my area, we do not have enough, I feel, of mainstream clubs. The new dancers really do not have a place to go. And our biggest problem is the club officers are pushing the callers. I don't let them push me, but some guys do let them push the dancers in to the plus level before they can really dance mainstream. And I think that's where we lose a lot of our new club people. I took a survey that I forgot to mention a while ago, and I'd like to mention it right now. Just a moment. I was at a dance a couple of weeks ago, and we had a pretty good sized dance for that particular area. Their usual dances this year have been running 4 to 6 squares. I felt very good. I walked in there and I had 12 squares. Biggest dance they've had all year. I took a poll to find out how many years the dancers had been dancing. 2% of that group have been dancing for 20 plus years. 10% have been dancing 10 to 15 years. 5% said 15 plus. 5 to 10 years, 10%. The biggest percentage that I had for the evening were people who were either 1 to 5 year dancers, had 73%. That tells me that we're losing our dancers from 5 years up.
If I may, Bob, your point about the mainstream clubs. In my opinion, I've done it myself, your next club could be a mainstream club. They don't have to go anyplace. They don't even know very much about the activity. I listened to old Johnston in the ad hoc committee there, and he was talking in terms of teaching them to himself. They didn't even have to know anything about the activity. And then as they develop their ability, then you can roll back the curtains and show them this beautiful fruit orchard that they have.
I agree with you. The only one problem we have in our area is we have a very strong dancer association. And if I were to take the class that I have this year, I have one class, and it's the biggest class that I've had in several years. And it's a result of a lot of clubs not continuing their class and sending their dancers over to me because I had the largest group in the area, and we were going to continue our class. When a lot of the clubs, their classes dropped down to less than 2 squares because of the hall rent, they cannot afford to keep the class going, so they try to pool them and send them over to somebody who has a successful class. Now, if I were to take those dancers, I'd love to take those dancers and start a mainstream club. If I did, I wouldn't call for my club anymore. I would lose several clubs as a result of it, because some of the other clubs that send the dancers over, I call for 3 and 4 times a year. I'm busy 5 nights a week calling. Now, I agree, we need to keep those mainstream dancers, and they need to dance mainstream for 1 to 2 years before they even attempt to dance plus. But the club officers are the ones that are really hurting us in our area for pushing these dancers, and as soon as they get them into plus, the next stage is 1 year later they're taking advanced workshops.
Next gentleman.
Thank you. Virgil Forbes from Washington, D.C. in Baltimore. Bob, like you, I've worked with teenagers quite a bit. I was lucky enough to spend a couple years in Seattle, where they have 14 or 15 teen clubs, up to and including their own spring festival, where the adults are invited but not really terribly encouraged. The teenagers are a lot of fun, and dancing is going to be strong in the Seattle area for 40 years from now, because even though the teens drop out when they get through university or start their families 10 years later, they still have good memories of square dance, and when they get to the point economically or with family that they can come back to dancing, they will. In places where there are teen clubs there that have been going for 25 and 30 years, and we're now on second generation, children of people who joined those teen clubs 20, 25 years ago. So working with the younger dancers, the teens, the university students, is going to pay long-term dividends, even if short-term we see them for 2 or 3 years and then they go away. So I'm not worried about those. I'm more worried about attracting new dancers in their adult years, 35, 40 years old, who are the core right now of our dance programs. They're the ones with the enthusiasm, with the leadership skills to be club officers, and hopefully with the economic basis to travel around, visit other clubs, perhaps invest 2 or 3 nights a week. Those are the ones who I'm looking to try to retain, especially because they've got the time now to do the job. And like you, I don't have the answer either. I've got fast learners and slow learners in my 2 classes, and some of them, I don't know, I think I'll recycle back through classes next year. I think they need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have other comments from the floor? Yes, sir?
Ed Ruddy, Portland, Connecticut.
Where are you from, sir?
Portland, Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
When you took the poll on who would like to see the list changed, I held up both hands. I was the only one, I guess. I'd like to explain that. We should not, I don't think, be totally slavish to these lists. Lists did a very remarkable thing. They standardized calling, which is one of the biggest things CALLERLAB did, was to make it so you could dance practically anywhere and pretty well expect what you were going to hear. But if we let the lists run us, we're performing a disservice to the dancer. One of your poll answers was that there's too many calls. Now, if there's too many calls, we're the ones who can take them out. And we're finding that we don't all call all of the calls every night. There are some calls we call with great frequency. Some of them are plus calls, simple plus calls. Teacup sheet is not a difficult call, and they have a lot of fun doing it, but we stuck it on a list. Therefore, it is sacred, and we can't teach it. So what a lot of people are beginning to think, and I was as addicted to the lists as you were, but I'm beginning to change because I can see the need to readjust these things to suit the situation we're in, because there are other pressures. We're on a guilt trip right now that we're doing everything wrong, and I don't think we are. We run the hazard right now of changing a lot of things we've done right and making new mistakes because we think it's all our fault. It isn't. There are other pressures on people's times that we can't account for. So what we got to do is the best job of what we've got. And if we can take these lists and shorten it and put the things in it we really need, that we use every day, then that list should be shortened to suit that and accommodate that.
Thank you. I think those of us who have, and I, from hands that have been were raised a while ago, will attest to the fact that prior to CALLERLAB establishing a list, that it was kind of a dog-eat-dog situation. If I were to go into Boston to call dance, I couldn't call the same maneuvers that I was calling maybe in California. So it's not all our fault. Okay, next gentleman.
My name is Dan Koft. I'm from New Jersey. Basically, I just want to say that this is my first CALLERLAB, and I'm hearing things now that I heard when I first went to Caller's school. Basically, as you gentlemen were saying, it's the attitude. You must lead and you must nurture. You must keep the dancers, club officers who, they think it's the best thing to do what they're doing, but you've got to kind of, wait a minute. You've got to lead, and you've got to, also, you can't be a dictator. You've got to, hey, I want to help you. My comment.
Thank you very much. Next gentleman.
My name is Ernie Sarnello from Poland, Ohio. I have a question for the panel. What do you do when you have to teach square dancers, both mainstream and plus, because we only dance plus in our area? I mean, how do you retain them when you push them through? Do the best you can. And you know they're not ready, and they go to dance, and a caller comes in, and we're advertised as a plus club, and he calls the plus movements. Even though they've had them, they get nervous, and they falter, and you just can't hang on to them.
Let me refer this back to you as a question as to who tells you how far and how much you should teach them and when you should stop and when you should start. Do you have a club leadership that tells you to do this, or are you running the operation?
No, this is a club-run group.
And they're telling you have so many weeks to get those prepared.
Right. I have 32 weeks.
I'm going to give you an opinion. You may not like it, but the opinion that I will give you is that you have to be a strong enough leader to stand up to the club officers and say, this is what I'm going to teach. You may lose the job. I haven't lost one yet on it. But you're going to have to stand up and be a leader and say, this is as far as I could go with these. I have to have time to do this. And it's going to be difficult.
Now, I take it upon myself to continue workshops after the graduation period. But the point I'm making is there's no mainstream clubs in our area. And, of course, I didn't want to bring this up as far as changing levels. You're talking about mainstream and plus. They have to go dance in a plus level. And that's where we're running into problems as far as retention and dropouts. They cannot handle it. Not all of them, but the ones who are just barely made it, you know they're not going to make it when they get into plus dance.
Yeah. Martin's going to say something here, too.
As much as I hate to say it, you're going to have to restructure your total program in your area. Because without mainstream, plus will not survive. And without basic, mainstream won't survive. And without plus, A1 can't survive. It's a total pie. You can't take one slice out of that pie and still expect to have a whole pie. And it's going to require not something you can do overnight. It's going to require cooperation of the dancers, the callers, all the people concerned, and it's difficult to get. Again, we're fortunate in our particular area. We have a dancer-caller joint association. We stand up and take shots at one another regularly, but we're all good friends. And when a leader comes to us and say, hey, you got to teach these people all the way through the plus, we say, baloney. And that's the only answer we can give them. And truly, if you want a dancer that's a happy dancer, you cannot. Because if you, for instance, were to hire any caller on this floor and tell them to call a plus dance to your plus dancers, and they are not fully capable mainstream dancers, he does not know that. And he's liable to come along and just, for instance, one of the calls that people want to drop off is fan the top. And he comes along and he says to you, square through, touch a quarter, scoot back, fan the top. So that's an all-position combination. You've got troubles on your hands right away because those people in all likelihood never saw it. They never ever had an inch of mileage on it. And if he tried the same thing from a standard wave, if he said touch a quarter, scoot back, cast off 3/4, now scoot back and fan the top, you'd have troubles. Because again, that mileage was not there. And without the mileage in mainstream, you cannot have a successful plus dancer.
Well, I understand that, but if you're teaching if you want to stop at mainstream, how are you going to support it? If we have small classes?
How many nights have you personally got free?
I have a couple.
Are you willing to sacrifice a night and establish a mainstream club? Are you willing to stick your neck out as a leader and say, hey, I'm going to create a place for these people to dance?
I have to start my own club.
I would suggest that is the solution.
Okay, well, that's what I say, because they're all club-oriented clubs out there, member-oriented, and no one has a mainstream, and it'd be like I'm going to defy the rest of the area and go out on my own.
Think how successful you might be in 2 years if you had two beginner classes of 10 squares each, and you suddenly wound up with 20 squares of mainstream dancers. You might have the biggest club in the area.
Anyway, that's the problem that we're having with retention and dropouts. We don't have the mainstream. Just got to go right from class right into the plus.
May I say you're not alone in many areas. May I ask Bob Poyner who wanted to add to this, then we'll get to you two gentlemen up there.
Okay, I just wanted to direct one thing to you. I'm from the Chicago area, in case nobody knows where Plainfield is. We do have a lot of new dancer dances throughout our class season. And these dances are sponsored by our Dancer Association in cooperation with the Callers and the Callers Associations in our area. We take our, every so many weeks, we have some dancers who have only been dancing, their classes started, and they've only danced a week. So they try and get the callers in that they feel are capable of taking a group that have only danced 1 week. Some have had 6 weeks of class, and make an interesting night for them. And this works very well in our area. You might want to try something like that. Now, I don't know how many clubs you have in your area, but if you have enough clubs in your area, you could do this. And even with one class, you can still do that and invite dancers from 25, 50 miles away. I have class people who travel from one side of the city to the other during rush hour to get to a dance. And they enjoy the new dancer dances. And you know what it's done in our area since we started it? The mainstream level has improved tremendously, because these people get an opportunity to dance to other callers other than their teacher, and it's helped.
I'd like to take a few minutes with you afterwards, if you'd like to take some time with me. I have some suggestions. Next gentleman.
Jerry Carmen from Rochester, New York. I have a adult singles group that I call for, and they dance year-round. And they took a vote a while back and decided they want to dance the plus programs. That's fine if you want to do that. To make things work smoothly, we'll have to run our class an entire year. So they agreed to do that, and we start our class off season from February, and we graduate them in January. And our retention a year from when they started to dance is about 75%. A year and a half later, most of those are still dancing at least somewhere, but they're still dancing because they're singles, they wander around. One year, somebody decided to start the normal routine of the September to April class, which is common in our area. And they tried a different night, and they got their class together, and they graduated them in April, and I attempted to bring the club level down in order to accommodate their entry into the club. And I would say that on the year after they started dancing, a year later from their start point, probably maybe 1 or 2 people were still dancing, and a year and a half later virtually nobody was dancing. It not only affected the class, but it also affected the club level. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that your club dances a certain level, and you should attempt to run your class long enough to be able to make the entry of the new people into the club as smooth as possible. And this was accomplished in our case with extending the class time in order to accommodate entry into the club.
Thank you. Next gentleman, come right ahead.
Thank you, Bob. Mac McCall from Fairfax, Virginia. And I have a couple of questions. First of all, your statement, Bob, that awareness of the general public, that we as square dancers are a very special interest group with maybe 30 or 40 people in a group. I find that to be oh so true. Where do we start to get this public awareness? Now, here in the Washington area, Baltimore, where we live, really nothing has been done. We advertise our big festival that the people come to each year. But how do we reach the general public? Is there someone who has an answer to that one? First of all, that's the first question.
I do. I have, during the summer, just before lessons start in August, we try to hit every mall in the area where our clubs are. And we put on demonstration dances in the afternoon from 2 to 5. And we make it a free dance for our dancers. The mall backs us on the activity because it's an entertainment for them. And we get little cards printed up. You can even print up little tickets and tell them it's to admit one couple free and give the date your class is going to start. And you'd be surprised how many people will show up that first night from these demos that you've done throughout the year. And we also have parade floats. And as we're going along the parade route, we have our club members walking alongside, passing out brochures on these free night class. And it works very well in our area, Mac. Ads in the paper will bring their attention to it. Nice big photograph if you work through your park district. If you have a park district, it'll work very nice. There are ways of getting to those people.
I might add, if I may, that in behalf of CALLERLAB, through our communications and our public relations committee, working on videotape, which can be actually sold to all the communities. This is in the process. We've been on this quite some time, and we have allocated a certain amount of money for this. So that is in the process. But these are a few suggestions. One other suggestion might just be minute, but it has worked in many areas, and that is to have 3x5 or small business cards printed and give them to all your members who are presently dancing, and have them in their pocketbook or their purse, which they can hand out to anybody who happens to be, looks like they want a square dance. And tell them when their next class is starting, or if it's quite some time in the future, we'll say, call this number for more information. That's another problem. So, go ahead.
Okay, to answer, Bob, we tried the shopping malls, and they came back to us now saying that their insurance will not allow them to have us in the mall. Second thing is that while you're out there with your demonstration square, here are a number of 200, 300 people standing around watching, thinking, oh, that's beautiful. But I couldn't do that spin, chain the gears, and relay the deucey and those things. The callers who are doing those are very, very not doing the things that the people, if they could use stars and circles so that the people could understand that they could do it, but to hear all these and to see the fancy clothes, they say, we can't do that. We wouldn't know how to do that. We don't have those fancy clothes. So are we really defeating our own purpose in that kind of a thing?
Okay, what I do, Mac, is I get audience participation. I show them how simple and how easy we start, and I tell them, these people do not learn this overnight. You have to explain to them they're learning a brand new language. It's like you going out and if you've never had French, take a course in French. You're not going to learn it overnight. Okay? My grandfather was a Frenchman. Okay? Now, the thing is that you can make it work if you work at it.
I'm drawing these things out because we have tried a lot of them, and a lot are very successful. The other thing is that I'm looking at is the helping of club officers. Someone said the folks just came into square dancing, they finished their class, and all of a sudden they're the president of a club. Now, in New Jersey, they have a Lust weekend. Let us speak together. These are the folks who are the original club members, maybe folks who have been officers, the callers, all getting together for a one Saturday, Sunday, and we're going to try to get that in the Washington area this year, trying to explain to these people, here is a way that you can help these new officers, teach them what has happened in the past that didn't work, how did we hurt clubs, and try to get them in. I'm looking for any way that I can in the Washington area, being in the WASCA and in CASLA organization, trying to find ways to get more people and keep them into square dancing.
Okay, one thing I might add is that we have been trying in our area to work with our dancer association so that we can work those problems out. And I think if you work closely with them, you can get a solution to the problem.
We have 4 minutes to wrap the session up, and we'd like to give each of you gentlemen an opportunity to speak. And would you please continue your remarks to maybe not over a minute, minute and a half? Next, please.
John Toth from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Just a slight suggestion here on awareness into the public. We are going to try to stimulate all the clubs in the area to give away a series of lessons to accompany 1 or 2 sessions to the area. It encompasses a 50-mile radius. And we have 2 tremendous talk shows, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, that listeners are listening to, and I listen to them now since I'm retired, and I listen to the tremendous women response to this thing, and a lot of men. And in the beginning of the first 2 weeks of September, if we can get these people talking on the air about the square dance awareness to this particular time, and give away these lessons to the people, we have a tremendous listening audience I'm sure we can reach. Here's one way we can do it, fellas.
Thank you very much. Next gentleman, minute and a half, please.
My name is Cliff Austin from Rome, New York. I inherited a club about 15 years ago in the Syracuse area, a very large club at that time. What I found that I don't worry about whether I keep my dancers or not, because what has happened is I make sure that they have fun. We're noted as one of the biggest feeder clubs in the Syracuse area. Dancers move on to higher levels, that's fine. We don't worry about that. What I do is I teach them. I cannot, be honest about it, I cannot teach them all in a 30-week, 2-hour. I cannot teach them all the figures. But what we do is we graduate them, and we have workshops during the summer, and we try to encourage them to dance a full year with the club after that, of combining, continuing to teach the mainstream program and then move very slowly into the plus level. The club at this point only dances really mainstream with some plus.
Thank you. I'm going to cut you off because I have 1 minute of tape left. The gentleman just told me. I want to say this, that you as members of CALLERLAB, whenever you come into a session and vote on something that you think is right, and you cast your vote, when you go out to your clubs, you follow through what you voted on. Don't go out and change your mind after you've established what has been voted by the consensus here. Too many times we're hearing this, and we hope that you will please do that. Yeah, don't say CALLERLAB said do it this way. We thank you for coming. We hope you had a good time. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.